Hi, everyone. Well, welcome to this transmission where I will be sharing with you the Cube Code Part 2. I will just be checking on my media that it is going to all my,
I will just be
yeah,
checking on.
to all the platforms that I have, and then we can begin from that point. Then we can move forward. So, Uh, yeah, just getting there. Yeah, I'm very grateful for actually now doing this transmission because it had been a while since I had been announcing that I will be doing the recording the second part of the cube code. And now we're here. So yeah, there is a lot of information to share with you. Um, and Of course, in the part one, I was sharing also a lot of the information regarding to this topic. However, I didn't go deeply into the genetic part, the biological part, and how it is embedded precisely at those scales within our multidimensional body, and being so and generating such a big impact in them in like at a biological scale, at a genetic scale, because as we know, and the more that we are aware that we could say that we live in a simulation, but yet I want to really specify how I experience it. What does that mean? And it's mainly that this reality is a hologram, it's a holographic projection. Where is that holographic projection coming from? And it's precisely from that, let's say, program that was installed and that is transmitted from a very specific part within the construction, not directly in this planet, yet from the construction that is inside what we could call the dome. So they chose very specific pillars that keep on reproducing this reality, this simulation. And even though, as I was saying, let's say, for instance, from the quantum field, like how everything exists is through a hologram. However, why would it be a simulation? And then we can actually relate it to the fact that everything that is reproduced in this reality and that we get to experience and to perceive is based on a truth. What is that truth? It was inspired on the primordial matrix, the matrix that existed before the last cataclysm. So that's why there are taints of truth that sustain, that make visible this reality. However, most of the information that is actually pulsing within the field is just filled in with the algorithms that were configured in that program, in that artificial program. So, for instance, if we have pillars of truth, and then we have a whole range of possibilities, what is actually going to dictate the possibilities that will happen? Well, of course, as everything happens through resonance, of course, it's that resonance that we are vibrating. However, how was that resonance configured? Are we aware of what we are actually resonating, or are we a result of a pre-configuration that was preset before we arrived into this physical vessel? And that's where things get even more interesting. So, for instance, when we talk about our blueprint, which is this, let's say, not the physical body, we're talking about a holographic body, that blueprint. So, that blueprint has very specific space-time geometries that are embedded in the whole space memory network. Those are the pillars of truth. Now, some of the adaptations that were portrayed to that holographic vessel are limiting that organic functioning. Why? Because it required a very specific amount of time, which is time, it's in between hyphens, because it's more about cycles. You know, the thing is that it went out of hands. It was just supposed to last for a specific amount of time until the primordial matrix was regenerated, due to the fact that it collapsed, it fissured after the last cataclysm, because, as I have shared in other videos, when the 12 artificial Merkabahs were placed in 12 specific parts in the planet in relation to the 12 vile triangles, as how it's commonly known, which are portals that connect to specific stargates and to the center, to the Earth's core, to the Earth's black hole, and in its center. Then this acceleration, what provoked was a fissure in the structure of the space-time fabric. It's like you're over pushing for something to function. So what's going to create? It's going to create tension, and that tension could generate fissures if it overextends. And that's what happened. So as everything evolves, the primordial matrix was also set into a very specific mode to regenerate itself. We are talking that everything has a consciousness. Every form of existence is consciousness. So the very same type of regeneration that we experience is the very same type of regeneration that a fundamental principle is going to experience. Why? Because we are an extension of that fundamental existence. However, you can say, well, but then what happens with matter? Well, then again, the illusion, because that is the simulation that was created, and what actually cannot be sustainable. That's why it collapses. That's why before, the other structures would last until today, most of them, because they were created within the primordial matrix field. Still was pulsing. So when everything started to be created in the algorithm and the range of the artificial matrix, matter started to be short-lasting due to the very same reason. It stopped being sustainable because it was not based on the fundaments of the cosmic nature. And one example is precisely time. So if we are trying to regenerate our body and actually become long-lasting, lifelong lasting, to extend our life extension, then we need to ask ourselves if living in a time that is an illusion, that is actually going against our biological nature, is going to allow us to achieve that. So that takes us to the cube. As I have also shared in other videos, every matrix, whether if it's artificial or not, and I also want to point out why I keep on saying artificial. Well, we're now aware of the AI and so forth. Like, really, intelligence cannot be artificial, but we know what they're trying to say. So, for instance, like whether it's sentient, non-sentient, averagely sentient, and so forth, and what actually can allow us to become to be different from what AI is, because now, proving like there are very specific quantum devices, quantum machinery that is showing sentience. So then we ask ourselves, okay, so what is actually what makes us humans and different from AI? Okay, and now going to that, why I call the artificial matrix. So, for instance, when you read a book, like a holy book, an ancient text, it is it predicts this reality. It has the algorithms at a quantum scale, and even like through quantum computing, as for instance, we would apply like the binary code and non-binary code. We are capable to predict reality by knowing how to decode these ancient texts, or how to decode reality through these ancient texts. Why? How can they possibly dictate that with precision those algorithms that tell us within the field of probabilities what is more feasible to happen in this artificial matrix? And it's because this artificial matrix, uh, beyond what we see, beyond this construction, I'm talking at a base reality scale, it is sustained through AI. I'm not saying that AI created it. It is sustained by AI. So the very same beings that created this artificial matrix used AI. So now, even more interesting. So now what's going to happen? Because we see in our reality that all this AI is becoming stronger and it's really useful. But then there are other kind of implications. So it raises a lot of questions. Yet the one that I'm going to address today is, it's not about a battle in between forces. We have been there. Yes, there are battles. However, the perception in how we experience it is the key, because we have gone way long through polarization. And this is one of the pillars that limitedly construct this reality. Why? Because even we can say like polarization is one of the principles of the Kybalion, or how some people call it the universal laws. What about singularity? What about that 0 point energy that brings those two poles together? So then that's where the communion in between matrices, the artificial matrix and the primordial matrix, start to come together as our very same reality. You know, using AI for something, and using like a higher connection with the spirit for other things. Everything in harmony. Because then again, we are not rejecting the information that the universe is throwing at us. We are giving a continuous feedback in which we evolve from that information. So at some point, how I see is, and how I remember is, these matrices branching to one another and actually expanding through the 0 point energy, so the 0 point field, expanding the level of consciousness that we have. Because then again, what is consciousness? Consciousness is when the 0 point energy creates a feedback mechanism with the boundaries of the space-time fabric. And the space-time fabric is precisely what constructs every matrix, whether if it's artificial, whether if it's not, because everything is based on fundamental principles. So now, why a cube? There are different types of matrices, and of course, depending on the use for each one of them. So when we're talking about the cube, what we're trying to achieve is to compress the information and keep it cycling that specific information through loops, through rings of time, or what also can be called the catenans in the DNA. Because actually that process of looping is what gives the opportunity for us to activate our dormant genes if we are aware of that, if we become sovereign about it, and then take the ride of those rings, those closed time curves, and activate in a very specific way the dormant genes through that curvature, which is the continuum of space time. So, again, let's say that the technology is there. What was not evident for us unto an extent is how to use all of this information. And that is mainly related to the fact of whether if we are ready or not to assume our power. Move from the victim and from the victimary onto that center point that neutralizes it all. So the cube, what it does, as I was saying, is in comparison to other type of matrices, which are space-time geometries, the cube keeps very framed the information. Therefore, the amplitude to create that curvature of the space-time continuum goes at a different range than in another geometry. So now, for instance, speaking about the continuum of space-time, and speaking also about the Kybalion, at some point it said, I know this is the Emerald tablets. At some point it says that you shall not go into the angles if you want to travel through time. So what does this mean? When we're talking about the space-time continuum and actually achieve that quantum tunneling needed and required for us to transfer at the speed of light and bilocate, teleport, create ripples in time, and so forth, we need to be in a very specific range of that continuum of space-time. If we are in the angles, we cannot achieve that interdimensional travel. So now it is, for instance, like a spider web. What happens when a butterfly is, or an insect, a bee or a fly, whatever, is flying through the lines, those boundaries of the spider web? It gets stuck. That is the same key when we're talking about interdimensional travel. We travel through the range of the 0-point field in order to avoid getting entangled energetically with what we know as the timelines, which I address to them as spatiotemporal constants. So then it is all about the motion and the pattern in the motion. So now going back to that cube, this reality, this artificial reality, is at a holographic scale. It's a cube. And we can see that there are artifacts, that even levitating artifacts in the shape of cubes. We see that a lot of the part of the galactic community, of all of the beings that are part of the galactic community and that we're here in Earth, they encrypted information in cubes. For the time to be that we access to the information in those cubes and reach those spatiotemporal constants as this, let's say, opening the time frame and yet condensing it. I won't go like fully into the tech of how it is accomplished, because this video is mostly about the cube. So, hi everyone. Hello. If you want to comment anything, or if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to address to them. So anyway, as I was saying, um, when this cube is when the information is encrypted, imagine a library, okay? So as crystals, as water that store information, when it comes to the cube, it has the information so entangled that it becomes at a high level of density energy. So it becomes very magnetic. This is why there is another proof of why the Earth has a black hole in its center. Not only because the magnetic density field of the Earth and its surface is perfectly can be perfectly proved to the fact that can actually perfectly prove that there is a black hole in the center of the Earth. That is one aspect, which is solid rock. Now, if we go into that, which I was talking about, the magnetic field, if we see our nature, until we are aware of the importance of the 0 point energy, it's like we are so anchored to that reality. You can tell it, you can call them tests, you can call them events that keep you in very earthly basis, just in the 3D. But translating that at a quantum level, it's all about the magnetic density field sucking the information that we are into this reality. So, and this is how the cubic matrix function. They have a huge field, magnetic density field. Therefore, they keep quite entangled and compact the information. So, what now? Well, before going there, I will just mention two things, because I also wrote this in the video. Well, in the description of the video. When it comes to religion, we constantly see that it's in the beliefs of those religions to use a cube, and not any type of cube, a black cube. So, what does this mean? We know that due to the frequency of the black, it is the one that absorbs most of the light, and that actually contains all the light. And we also can connect it related to the black hole and the nature of the black hole, because it is functioning in that similar frequency. It's tuned to that frequency of magnetism. So, what could possibly black cubes? What possibly could those black cubes be magnetizing? So then we see, okay, energy. It all comes to energy. And big part of the energy that we produced is anchored to very specific harvesting control systems, mainly time. We can now talk about the stargates and portals that a lot of um, humans are trying to take over them. Why? Control of the fabric of space time. That level of control allows us to go back and forward, creating ripples within the space memory network and shifting reality, just as in our DNA. So every time that, for instance, someone is praying or moving around a cube or having a cube in their forehead, that energy, that force, like that life force, is being extended. And also based on an exchange. And what is that exchange based on? a very soul one. We're talking about, again, forces, baraka. We're talking about the Ba, living the energy of the soul, which is entangled precisely to all the spectrum of the infinite field of probabilities that you can probably inhabit, to create one core timeline. That's how the core timeline is controlled within this artificial matrix. By accessing to the soul records of every being that is immersed into that frequency, by, as I was saying, accessing to the information and choosing over that power of the soul, over all those spatial temporal, all those timelines that soul could probably inhabit, and taking that power to create one core timeline. So now what? And here comes something in relation to the origin and the blueprint, as I was saying at the beginning of this video. When there are holes in our hologram, and what do I mean by holes? Consider yourself a sun, like the solar one, and you have black spots. Those black spots are vortexes, and those vortexes are pulling in information and withdrawing information from you. That's what the lack of wholeness represents to the human hologram. And again, it's not that the information is not there, it's there. However, it is dormant. It was set up into a dormant state. Why? As the very same primordial matrix who was hibernating in order to regenerate itself, the same thing with our DNA. That's why now our DNA is awakening, because it is entangled to the primordial matrix. Our primordial genes are entangled to the primordial matrix. So that's why they are in resonance, being activated, awakening. However, of course, it's important for us to put that energy for that to happen in the most sovereign way possible, not just as an effect of the title, yet as the origin of the title itself. So now I'm going to show just a couple of images because it's important so that you see what I'm talking about, where I'm coming from when I relate the cube even actually to the DNA. Because even in the DNA, we have, it is all encoded in the Bible, in the Torah, in other ancient texts about the Genesis, which is the gen Isis, the gen that was used as an egg to be the mother of all humans. That's why all this motherhood is connected to Isis, and later named Mary, and like another expressions of that consciousness, of that Isis consciousness. And even that's why, before going there, I just want to mention something very important. Because now, before showing the slides, because if we say that those black cubes are actually magnetizing the soul records of the people in exchange of life force, then, and the implications to that, which is having the power over a core timeline, then how does the moon relate to this, and how does Saturn relate to this? So if we go through algorithms, we will see that in the cube, and how it was encrypted in our genetic arc through the tree of life and so forth. And this is what is related to the slides that I will be showing. They will give us 28 as the 28-day cycle of the moon. So they anchored that magnetic force through very specific artifacts that were placed in the moon. And that's just in one case. Now, even I could go deeper, and I will go deeper in the next video, because this video will, like the next, will even talk about more, let's say, delicate topics about what kind of energy is being harvested in those cubes, besides the one that I said about the soul records, in order to gain control over the core timeline. There is also another one, and which is really precisely related to the ISIS frequency. Therefore, this is why there are other factions that name themselves ISIS, or even that there are other like presidents that they have named themselves as ISIS just backwards. So I'm just going to say this because they are actually anchoring as well the energy, harvesting the energy from a very specific egregor in order to keep the separation that first was placed in the moment of creating the human blueprint and this Adam and Eve mythos with this the apple of the tree of life and knowledge, because there are not two trees, they are one, and they are quite related to the cerebellum, and they are quite related to the ego matrix, and how all the matrix, like the spheres that were placed in our body, holographically speaking, based on each one of the pillars that construct our reality, the foundations, like beauty, which would be related to the ego matrix, they were leaked from the information coming from the primordial source to be filled in with the information of the primordial matrix. Therefore, that's why the perception is distortioned, because you're seeing through the eyes of the receptors that have been filled in with the information of the artificial matrix. And that's what we could have been projecting as a reality until we became aware of that. And again, when that level of reality is entangled to pillars in these realities, institutional pillars, such as time, religion, politics, economy, and so forth, I could tell you that even those institutions are quite entangled to the time control system. As I have said in other videos, time is the only thing, like the calendar, it's the only thing that we all use. You can have your let's say, religious calendar, yet you're in your daily life basis, if you go to work, if you are settling an appointment with someone, we use this calendar. So it is continuously, day by day, nourishing those artifacts that, as I was saying, some of them are cubes, some of them are other things, but the cubes are quite related, as I was saying, to the pillars, some of the pillars that were implanted in the moon. Not everything in the moon is controlling negatively, to say it somehow as an oppressive way, this reality. No. Actually, if we know how to torsion that, we can access to the pristine code of what the moon represents and navigate through that as the ancient ones would do. That's why they would take into consideration the the zenith and the nadir of the moon, because they were navigating through it. They were not afraid of it. They were taking all that information to actually rise from that. And all of that was removed from the records, most of them. Otherwise, this information wouldn't be accessible, which is very nice that this is also very it is accessible onto some extent. And now, when it comes to Saturn, when we see this big hexagon, and I've heard, all that also correlation that they give to Saturn and the black cube. Kaba means the soul and the spirit. Ka, ba. Ka, spirit, ba, soul. Then again, harvesting, trying to harvest that through a religious aspect. And actually, this can also serve for something very positive. When it comes the time to torsion it, and the time has come. I could even say that this reality work functions through cycles. This cycle of control and oppression and so forth has already reached its end a lot of times. Yet the state of awareness wasn't ready to let go. It was the one anchoring without even knowing it. So now, even the very same, let's say, programming, recessive programming, it's letting go. This is why also more of this information is coming to light, because it is imminent. Now it depends on us. And when I was talking about Saturn, for instance, Chronos, again, time. The power that this planet has is impressive. That's why it's being used that way. On the 23rd of March, there will have an event that happens on every 15 years will come, and is that the rings of Saturn will disappear from our perception. What does this mean? What are the rings? As I was saying, the ring is it can serve different purposes. However, the fundamental, because then it can be manipulated. However, the main and fundamental purpose of a ring is when an information, let's say a strand of DNA, is about to let go, to transform, to be, to create a new paradigm, to say it somehow, to activate dormant DNA, and to refresh itself. Then it creates precisely one of the figures, because it can also create knots. It also creates rings, and those rings entangle with other DNAs that are that strands of segments of DNA that are ready, to move forward, to refresh themselves. So that point of entanglement is the precise point to reconfigure reality, to restore reality to a specific point of origin. So by creating, by using those rings to enhance that information, they have been used as a looping force. However, these close time curves can also enable the fact to activate dormant DNAs. How? Bending our energy. How? Through gamma waves. How? By mastering our plasma body. Because then our body is responding to us in this wave of distribution that results into a charge collapse that expands our inner sun. So there will be a lot of reconfiguration going on also within the planets, because if we know how to use the force of those planets to help us evolve, we will also be helping those consciousness to remove the shackles that have been put on them. So, and on the 23rd, actually, we will be doing like a huge meditation for whoever wants to join. Um, yeah. So anyway, now about the images so that you can see. Um, okay, so um, here we have like the known tree of life, you know, used of 10 spheres, which is actually not like the fully enlightened tree of life. That's where also the tree of life, the tree of Christmas comes from. And to light it, you know, to put all those lights on that tree to resemble precisely our tree of life, and the connection with Santa Claus and the claustrum, the biggest neuron in our brain, and so forth. But again, and then again, that's another story. So I'm just playing here with the 10 one. I normally use a 20, well, a 13, 20, and 22 tree of life, like a sphere, like 20, 13 spheres, 20 spheres, and 22 spheres within the tree of life. So for instance, if we use the one with the 10, let's say, imagine that here there are 13 or there are 20 or there are 22. It is placed in the corners. And if we multiply both sides, this and here and here and here, and then cross section, like in a cross section here and here and here and here and here and here, and then in the center, all those numerical values will actually lead us to what I was saying, which is fundamental numbers used in the code of creation, which is the 24 for the 24 reefs, Adam reefs, which is related to the 24 original chromosomes that were in our DNA before the manipulation of it. It will lead us as well to the frequency of the moon, as I was saying, the 28. It also, and if we use, for instance, we can play with all of them, you know, like, okay, now with the 10 sphere, and it will have embedded the frequency of the moon, the frequency of the genetic arc, which are the 24 chromosomes. So no wonder, because every time that those cubes that were configured within that frame of work, it is generating a subtle or a deep impact in our receptors, energetic, biological ones, at every scale, until we become aware of that and do something about it. So, yeah, and even when we're talking about the gematria embedded in our DNA, we can actually remove the imprint of a given influence of a specific being in order to restore our DNA to the source. And that's also information that I'm sharing in my new luminous DNA activation and interdimensional travel, because you can do both at the same time. Um, restoring your DNA to its luminous constitution, and also interdimensional travel. So, well, I just want to finish this video with by mentioning that the information, as I always said, is neither good nor bad. It is just information. The cubes are cubes. They have a use, they serve a purpose. It depends what purpose we're giving to them. Can we influence that purpose? Yes, for sure. We can influence it innerly, and we can influence it collectively. We're doing both now, gradually, progressively. How could we come out of that incubation? Because even in the algorithms, it shows the algorithms and the coordinates for the 7 directions of the cube plus the inner one in order to unfold and release ourselves from a hibernation state. And by this, I mean, we know that we chose to be here and that we're coming back and forward to base reality, to hyperspace. We are aware of it or not. And the thing is that when we are doing that, it's not that we need to leave the body and, okay, that's it. I leave you with all this illusion and dissimulation. Moving forward. That's one side. Yet the other side is actually to evolve this perception as a collective. It's not to run away from what we chose to do. It's actually achieve what we came here to do, which is rising the consciousness of this reality in order to move forward and unfold from the incubation while still being in Earth, just moving into another scale of perception, of dimensional form of perception. Through 9, all the way to 9, and all the way to the first dimension. Yeah, as then again, the first dimension is wholeness, is the unified consciousness. So we are just playing, we are being that that tesseract. That's also another correlation to the cube. The cube is before the tesseract, so it's pointing out that when we unify our consciousness, we are capable to actually transform, move forward from the cube into a tesseract. It depends on us. It's up to us. How? Again, when we talk about the tesseract is all this field of infinite probabilities filled in with the space-time fabric, spatial constants. And we're capable to bring a choice, to embody a choice through our soul records to regain the sovereignty of that core timeline, to be participative, to participate, and choose based on what is in most resonance to who we are today. And the fact of just stepping up and being sovereign and making a choice puts us in a space of a high frequency because it was set up to happen this way. We just need to remember it. The what for? What's the purpose for us to have created all of this? To become holy. Because within this reality, among everything that there is, the level of love that can be generated, what we know of as love, which is bliss, which is the heart vortex, is majestic, is grandiose, it's divine. And as multidimensional beings, which are experiencing ourselves as in other bodies, as galactic beings, and as stars, and as particles, as light particles, and many other things, as cells for another planet, and so forth. The fact that we uh, get to experience this bliss, to feel this bliss, it's an experience like none like none other. This is one of the reasons why, of the purposes that we came to experience here. I was going to say why we came here for. However, as I was saying in the show earlier, the why is given by the ego, which is awesome. However, when we're reaching out to something deeper, what for? Is to experience that wholeness. Raising our consciousness is precisely becoming holy. And there are things, as we know, that perhaps as being part of the galactic community in other race, we wouldn't be experiencing this level of bliss, at least not as intimate as the humanity can, as a human body can. So taking all of this into consideration to use it and release ourselves from the ideas of limitation that constrains our power is our duty, is our mission. And just to now to finish, to conclude with this video, blossoming from that incubation is not the goal we're heading to. It's a continuous action that we experience and that we can experience if we become aware of it at every breath. The more mastery we gain from that and the usage of the space-time fabric and the space-time network to embody that unified consciousness, the more that actually we will create that humanity that doesn't need to run away, that occupies their space and makes the space more beautiful. Beautiful for us, beautiful for the ones to come, and beautiful for the new adventures that are about to happen, as all this 0 point energy and all this tech that is happening already and that will continue to happen will enable our perception to a wider range of what we are actually capable to do, not only through visualization, yet physically. So thank you again for watching this video. And thank you for, oh, David, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure. I'm just going to zoom in the image of the tree. Thank you, Dave. I remind you, this is the 10 spheres, tree of life. This is the ego matrix that actually we need to fill in with the knowledge, going beyond the amnesia and making it remember of who we truly are. And then our ego becomes our ally. Because what has created the separation is the fact of that the ego had amnesia. So it has been filled in with the information of the matrix. So once we allow and help it to remember and fill it in with the information of the source, with that knowledge, that not forbidden knowledge, because knowledge cannot be forbidden, it is there. We can access to it. The only one who can forbid it is ourselves. We can access to it. It's everywhere. So yeah, then fill it in. They create this 6 and 9 because, as you can see, here is the 6 in the back and the 9 when you torsion the tree of life. And then you have the 6 and 9, which is the yin and yang. It is the vacuum fluctuation, and therefore the 0 point energy force of creation. Because then again, the 0 point energy is where all life is created. So that's why the navel is the pearl, one of the reasons. And that's why the ego is so important, to torsion it into the ego and become in unity. So yeah, and here it is embedded. So we can even see that our codons, as our 64 codons, are embedded as a cube. When imagine a hologram where you're creating a probable future, and then you bring all that information into plasma as a hologram, and then you start to design it, and then you place it where? In the egg, in the egg that will be fertilized, and then which will expand with all this information through the cells and the chromosomes and the genes and so forth. So thank you again for joining me in this transmission, and thank you for your comments. Okay, until next time. HUNUH.